the new head coach and promotion from offensive coordinator Joe Brady joins the staff as the head coach. He was introduced today by the organization, by Brandon Beane. And it was funny because we just talked about it last week, how poor of a press conference they had. And now I don't know if we got a chance to kind of review this one, but it's ultimately in better spirits. So I'm actually going to go to you, Brandon, first, and just kind of see, like, what are your thoughts on this hire? Where do you think the team goes moving forward? We can kind of take it from there.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's definitely been a bit of a polarizing hire. It feels like where yes, I think people understand that Joe Brady's done a fantastic job as the Bills OC. Josh Allen, 2 years removed from an MVP. James Cook this season, rushing leader. Like their offense is one of the best in the NFL, and there's no doubt about that. He's been a huge part of it. But I think the confusion kind of lies with the signaling around McDermott's firing and how Terry Pagula and Brandon Beane were up there saying, we've kind of hit a wall in the playoffs. We're looking for maybe a new culture. We want to kind of find something that's going to take us over the top. And not to say Joe Brady can't do that, because there's no indication that he won't be a great head coach. He obviously has done great as a coordinator, and he seems to be a guy that the team likes and wants to play for. But again, it's just kind of, how does that make any change in terms of
Mm.
the culture? You're going to have the same guy who's now leading the team. He's been there alongside the guys who were leading it before, and seemed to get along with a lot of what was going on. And they seem to have, a pretty close relationship, at least between Bean and Joe Brady. They seem to really like working together, and they seem to want to move forward together. And I think Bean's the one who's kind of setting the tone in terms of obviously who's going to be in the building and who's going to be taking charge in terms of a leadership role. So I'm interested to see what everything looks like, obviously going into next year. But I think that that's kind of where people are looking, as to the signaling around this. And is there something, behind the scenes where maybe Sean McDermott was kind of just squeezed out a little bit, and it wasn't really so much about the team, underperforming or doing anything that they've talked about. It's just, well, we kind of just want to get our guy in here and bring him in and keep him in the spot. So I think that's kind of where the two worlds have gone. I think I said to you guys, I wanted the young guy Udinski
Hmm.
from the Jags. I know Brady's only like 36. He's not like an older. He's no spring chicken. He's still in his prime, probably, in terms of finding his role, especially going into a first time head coach job. But I definitely thought you just want to have a different voice, someone who hasn't been around, who can kind of set the tone a little bit differently and maybe bring a new kind of energy to the team. And if Joe Brady's going to kind of elevate his leadership style with the new role, then we'll see, and hopefully that works out. But it's definitely, like you said, been an interesting decision. And I from what I've heard today, the press conference went well. So it is
Yeah.
interesting, that contrast of where they were a week ago, and now they seem to be signaling like the ship is steady. So
Yeah.
I won't lie, Brando. You sold me on Udinski last pod there. I was kind of like, ooh, this is a good sales pitch here. And then I did see at some point he did start following the Bills. I don't know if it was on Instagram or X, I forget which one, but it's funny how that always happens and then it goes nowhere. So yeah, never take those as anything
he
concrete. But
he definitely wanted that job, because I think, from my
yeah,
understanding, the way that the events played out is he interviewed for the Bills job, was definitely interested, and was interviewing for the Browns job as well, I believe. Kind of pulled out of that one, I think, with some hope that he would get the Bills one. And then
Hmm.
basically, as soon as he didn't get the Bills job, he just said, okay, I'm going back to Jacksonville. So I think, to me, that signals that that was probably the only job he was seriously interested in. Um, and I think that does speak volumes, I think, about where the organization is, especially after last week, when it felt like the chaos was coming, and maybe coaches don't want to go there. It still feels like there's a lot of interest in Buffalo in terms of the positions they have. We'll see who they decide on for a new defensive coordinator, but I'm sure that will be a pretty big name who will come in and help them shore up what was probably their biggest flaw last year. So it's been a decent start to the offseason, but we'll see how things play out once we get to players and of course coordinators too.
Yeah. Why does it feel like it never gets to a point where, like, you bring up the following, unfollowing? I feel like that always turns into a story, mainly in social media, but it always like gets play, and then it never ends up turning into anything, whether it be
never.
people or coaches following or unfollowing. Because I remember, like, wasn't it AJ Brown? I don't know if this year or last year he unfollowed the Eagles. I might be making that up, but I know things like that have happened, and then nothing changes. So I don't know where that comes
It's
from.
so countless that you can't even recall a specific one because it does feel like a
Yeah.
once a month occurrence, depending on whatever is the topical story of that month. Yeah, in the Joe Brady of it all.
Hmm.
Yeah, from what I learned about Joe Brady through this year and some of the fan viewpoint on him, I think he was rumored, I think, mid-season to be interested in potentially interviewing on another head coaching job on another team. And some of the fan reaction I saw there, I can't remember the specifics of it, but fan reaction I saw online was like, "Oh, please, opposing team, go hire this guy. It'll be a great hire." Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, in a sarcastic sense. So I think the view I saw from a fan perspective is different than the view I saw after he was hired. I think I saw a lot more media and football inclined people giving the okay for this hire. Maybe it is a safe one, and they in the press conference, I think Bean or maybe it was Pagula that was I think it was Bean that was talking about continuity and wanting continuity with this. Um so it's less a foundational change and more just a new paint job on the house, which it's a safer route. And I think to your guys' point, like, is this a fully new direction? No, it's not. And I think as well to Brandon's point, for me as someone who doesn't know the specifics about Joe Brady scheming this and that, I think I'll put a lot more stock into what those player changes are this offseason. We can hear wide receiver every week, but if there isn't a change there, then I probably feel the same way about the Bills going into next year.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny too that you mentioned quickly the idea that they're going to change kind of their scheme. It really is under question because a lot of people were saying, and what I've seen, even like you said, people who know, the schemes that teams are running, the schemes that individual coaches want to put in play. And there has been some question about whether or not the offense was completely Brady's, this year even, or the past years. Like, was he running his, 100% full scheme, the same thing he'll run as a head coach? Or how much was Sean McDermott involved? And I'm sure they have other, voices that have, a say in there too. So it definitely is going to be interesting to see if the offense is the same, but with hopefully a couple better pieces added. That'll only really juice the production they have on offense. But for me now, yeah, like the attention will turn to the defense, and we'll just have to see where it comes out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the fail safe, and I wonder how much Josh Allen actually had a hand in this hire. And if he did, I wouldn't be surprised if he was a big factor because obviously you want to stick with continuity as kind of being the big buzzword that we've spoken about here, but just comfortability. I think like when you have a guy like that, obviously we talked last week as well about how this job is probably highly coveted because a lot of your work is pretty much set up foundationally for you, i.e., you have this guy that can make plays in certain ways. But interestingly enough, I think it's just, are you able to use Josh Allen to the best of his abilities? I think he is a great player when he's able to move a little bit around and he's not scared to stay in the pocket because he can move. He's got the legs for it. And I think as he's been a little bit better and more mature in his career, he's been able to make decisions as to when to run and when not to run. Now, that Denver game aside, a lot of people are giving him grief for that one end of the second quarter run where he fumbles the ball. I mean, that's a miscue and it happens, but you have to be able to kind of spin that cycle and go, okay, well, one play shouldn't define an entire game in that sense. So all of this to say, I don't know enough about Joe Brady as a person after this press conference to say he was the number one guy, but I think if you're kind of trying to be stable and preach stability in the organization, it is a little bit weird that it does feel, I think you mentioned it earlier, Brandon, like McDermott after this really does seem like a bigger scapegoat as we get further into this process, because you're just going to move another guy that was likely in his ear up into his position. And now again, he has nothing to say as a result of it. But I don't know. I don't know if Udinski was the right move. I still just look at a guy who's 36 and I'm like, I mean, Sean McVay is an incredible football mind, and he was hired, I think, I don't know the exact age, but early 30s, and it's worked out. It's probably a one-off to say, like, this guy's going to be the next Sean McVay, but I'm thinking, like, at that age, it's crazy to think that you're going to move into a role to kind of lead the offense when what I don't even know how old Josh Allen is, like late 20s, early 30s. Maybe that's a good relationship because you have maybe a similar, not because you're that similar in age, but maybe you have a similar mindset when it comes to offense. So maybe that works out, but I'm looking forward to it. And I think they're just happy that this process is probably over, especially after last week. And you're like, we can focus now on the offseason and OTAs and moving forward in that direction.